Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. I am really excited to present to you today a much requested interview. Today, I am talking to Curtis from the Swedenborg Foundation, and you guys have been asking me for over a year to get into the Swedenborg material. This opportunity just presented itself, and I jumped on it. Curtis Childs is the Vice President of Programming at the Swedenborg Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to sharing the insights of Emanuel Swedenborg, an 18th century Christian mystic who was allowed to witness the afterlife firsthand, as well as communicate with spirits and angels about the true nature of reality. He is also the main presenter for the Off the Left Eye YouTube channel, which offers answers to a wide range of spiritual questions, including the inner meaning of the Bible, what heaven and hell are really like, life on other planets, and how human beings can find peace, meaning, and purpose in life. And let me tell you guys, this is one of the best and most interesting conversations that I have ever had with anyone. The entire time, my brain was just exploding with all the connections that he was making for me and the different angle that he was presenting for topics that we commonly talk about, like the way that he described heaven and hell and why and how people go to each place, and life on the other side and how we live and evolve on the other side. In fact, in this interview, we started off with the question, who or what is God? And the answer blew my mind. And then we proceed to go on and talk about what happens when a person passes over, what's the sequence of events, and where are all the different places, if we want to put it that way, where people can go. And I can tell you right now, Curtis is going to be back for another interview. That's how awesome this conversation was. So without further ado, here's Curtis. You can find his links in the description to the Swedenborg Foundation, as well as his YouTube channel. Don't forget to check back tomorrow for part 2 of this conversation. Thank you for watching. Hello, Curtis. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so looking forward to having this conversation. So thank you for being willing to do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited.
So would you like to start out by just explaining, for those who may not be familiar, who Swedenborg was and how he had his visions and got his information?
Totally. If you read Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, which is where the term near-death experience came from, there's a section in it where he gives parallels. So he was this doctor. I'm sure many of your viewers know the story already, but it's a great story. So he was this doctor who was hearing all these people in the hospital on their deathbeds talking about these amazing experiences they were having. So he decided, I've got to start to catalog these. And I think what was most striking to him, beyond how amazing the content was and how comforting that image of life, what life might really be like, was how many similarities there were across all these different stories. It was people in different hospitals, different parts of the world. And that got him thinking that this can't have been something that just started 10 years ago or whenever. So where back in human history would we see this sort of stuff? And he gives a couple of parallels. He talks about the Bible and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but he also talks about Emanuel Swedenborg as this remarkable instance of parallel description of these spiritual experiences or near-death experiences, but that happened in the 1700s. So Swedenborg, who's the most famous scientist right now? I've been going back and forth about it. Maybe there's like Neil deGrasse Tyson is pretty famous. Do you know him? So he's not just a scientist, but he's also a well-known personality. He's in a lot of video productions. Whenever I'm watching videos about the universe, he's in there. So imagine if he tomorrow wrote a blog post or something saying, hey, I started to have these visions, and now I can talk to spirits and angels, and I've visited heaven and hell, and I'm going to start writing about that from now on. I mean, that's a little bit like what the Swedenborg thing was. So Emanuel Swedenborg was actually born in the late 1600s, but he was deep into a career, a really successful, almost polymath career, where he was famous and leading the field in a lot of different areas. So back in his day, the science was not nearly as complex as it is now. So you could really be really good at a lot of different things. So he was like a leading anatomist. He was an inventor. He was a politician, and he also had specialties within all these different fields within science. And he brought the first academic journal to Sweden, did a lot of stuff that was put his name on the map in a lot of places. And in his mid 50s, he started to have a series of dreams. He actually wrote a journal of his dreams as it was happening, which that today a lot of people do that, but back then, particularly the idea of analyzing your own dreams wasn't really mainstream. So initially it was a travel journal where he's just saying, I went to Amsterdam, went to Stockholm, but then he started to record these dreams, and you can see the progression of that because people found that and they published it. You can see the dreams not only being really meaningful and starting to tell him things about his life, but then they began to spill over into wakefulness. That he said he would have these visions in real life, and it culminated in he had this really powerful experience where he says that he met Jesus and had this world opened up to him, and from there on out he was having near-death experiences every day for 30 years. And not only that, I don't think there's any other longer record of spiritual experiences. I mean, I don't know. You have to take his word for it. It's just a record that he wrote down, but I don't know if anyone else has cataloged this much information. But also, he was used to really writing stuff in an organized way. He was used to studying things and being able to lay things out and have things in sequence. So what you come out the other side of that with is a really thorough, really detailed, really clear, really almost academic description of how life after death works, who and what God is, what the point of life is, all the big spiritual questions just laid out in plain view and done in an incredibly comprehensive way. So he touches on just about everything that you could touch on. And he does it in a way that rings true, I think, for a lot of people who have had their own spiritual experiences, as evidenced by not only Raymond Moody, but others in the early near-death experience movement, knowing of him and referencing him, but also things that sync up with and jive with a lot of the major religious traditions in the world. Swedenborg is usually referred to as a Christian mystic, and he's definitely using that vernacular. But there's a book published about him called Buddha of the North by a major figure in Zen Buddhism who brought it westward, saying that there's these underlying principles that harmonize with that. So it's a really fascinating contribution to human spirituality that I think has been overlooked for a number of reasons. And so part of what the work I'm doing is trying to let everyone know, if you've had a near-death experience, or you've had another spiritual experience, or you're just trying to live a life where you're trying to connect with God, there's probably something good for you in here that you might not have seen. So I'm just trying to get the word out about that.
Wonderful, Curtis. And it's amazing to me that I've been studying near-death experiences for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, and I only recently heard about Swedenborg. So I'm really glad that you are getting the information out about him. And I have so many questions that I'd like to ask you. So maybe we could start with something that you just briefly mentioned that caught my attention. Who or what is God?
Yeah, so Swedenborg usually uses the term the Lord to refer to God. And in that he means, it depends on, so I would say it depends on who's asking, because there's so many different ways we can start it. So he'll say the Lord, and that means Jesus Christ, but to him it was Jesus is God entirely. You have one God, and it's like soul, body, and action. So you have the Father and Son and Holy Ghost are one. You have Jesus, like that's God in front of you. He also talks about God is divine love and divine wisdom. So, which is, he says it's not only all knowledge and all love, but also this is like substance. Love is like substance, and wisdom is like form. So God is the underlying essence from which reality was derived. So there's stuff that depending on where you're coming from, there's different. He actually wrote these different books that I think different audiences would get based on the kind of terms he's using, but it all connects. It's all very comprehensive. So it connects in the middle. So God is human. This is a big thing to him, is that God is human, meaning everything that makes us human. If you think, could you do that to someone? That's inhuman. or these are not inhumane conditions. It's because we understand that to be human, sure, part of it is like what shape you are, but there's something about love at the core of it. Otherwise, why would you call something that was unloving or barbaric inhuman? So that humanity that makes us who we are, and you say that it's a human being, that is, we are a little image of God. So God is the most human being that there is. So that also means that God can be known. This was big to Swedenborg, that you can have a relationship with God. I think this is something that a lot of near-death experience people will talk about. They're in the light, and they see a being of a light, and the being has fairly human characteristics. It radiates love. It knows everything about them. It's comforting. And I think this was a key to Swedenborg. I mean, the take-home message is God knows everything there is to know and loves you completely, and is something that you can understand. So there's a picture of God in everything in the universe, particularly in the way that things tend toward usefulness. Swedenborg has this concept that he calls use or usefulness. He wrote in Latin, so there's different English translations for everything that he wrote, but this essentially, it's usefulness is doing something constructive for somebody, and that is, in a way, you could say that the love and wisdom in God that I was talking about before, they have this drive to do something useful. He even says at one point that God created the universe so that usefulness could exist. That the system that we're in, all of the forms and all the arrangements that everything is in, it comes down to, it creates a world in which I can do you a favor. Because that doing something nice for someone, doing something kind, and particularly for Swedenborg, it was doing something kind because you believe it's the right thing to do, not for some other sort of motive. So I like to give the example of, like, if I'm giving this interview right now, we're hoping that this interview is going to be something good, do something useful, as in somebody is going to be, they've had a hard day, or they're feeling lost in life, and they come and they say, oh, Melissa's got a new video, I'm going to watch it, and they get some kind of comfort, or they get some kind of concept that then when they need it later, it comes back to them at the right time. So we're doing something useful for people, and that's great. The best is if I'm coming at it, because I could be saying, oh, well, I hope everybody thinks I'm really great in this interview. Like, I hope everyone thinks I'm smart, and they think I know so much spiritual stuff. And that's sort of doing it for myself. But if I'm doing it because I am, and it's really hard to not have any of that in there. Like, we're human. And as Swedenborg said, you naturally have this sort of inherited tendencies toward that stuff, but which can be there, it's fine, but it shouldn't be the main thing. It shouldn't be what's driving you, or we work to make it so more and more the actual love of what's good is driving us, because that's where God is trying to get us. That's God's nature. So what would be the reverse of that is if what was really exciting me was, hey, we get to make this space where people are going to come in and allow God to use whatever we say to make their life better somehow. So that is the nature of God, is God is like pure loving usefulness. So what God wants to do is create happiness for beings. And so everything here that's come out of that is in service of that. Okay, that's a couple of things about God. I mean, he wrote books and books about it, but is that a good introduction?
Yeah, like my head is just exploding right now, because there's so much there, like so many different connections that you're making for me. I don't know if you're familiar with Law of One, but it's a channeled spiritual text, and it says the exact same thing, that God is love and wisdom, and that in our evolution as spiritual beings, we have to perfectly balance those two aspects. So that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, there's that's cool. I have not heard of that, but I'm not surprised. This is one thing that I've found, particularly in taking Swedenborg on the internet, is that it lines up with stuff. There's tons of stuff that agrees with it, and that, of course, if there's some truth in it, it should be that people are seeing different sides of the same truth. So actually, Swedenborg does talk about that balancing love and wisdom is what he calls the divine design. So everything is supposed to have some element of love in it and some element of wisdom in it. And when that gets separated, it causes all kinds of problems. A big one that he talks about is with religion when you separate what he calls separate faith from love. So if you have your ideas and theology, but you've separated that away from love for your fellow human beings, or away from the two great commandments, then you get all kinds of religious atrocities and problems. But it also destroys our ability to connect to God through religion, because it's meant to be that the faith and love work in tandem with each other. So that's just one example, but he says it's in everything. And that divine providence is constantly trying to return everything to having love and wisdom. Somehow everything, like even I don't know how, this microphone, everything can somehow have that return to it, but particularly in people. That's where the work can really happen when we balance this. He says that for anything to really persist, for anything to really last a long time, it needs to have equal measures of love and wisdom, and that we grow spiritually. You have to grow in both to keep on progressing. So it's cool, and I'm glad you knew about that connection, because I hadn't heard about that, but I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me how the same truths can come through so many different avenues. So let's say that somebody has just passed on. Can you maybe walk us through where they're going in the afterlife and what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. It's called Off the Left Eye. And that name comes out of Swedenborg telling the story of what it's like to cross over. So he wasn't there having a near-death experience as you think of the term commonly, where some accident happened that actually put his life in danger and so triggered the experience. I know there are now STEs and shared death experiences and everything in between, but he wrote down that he wasn't in any danger, but he was told that he was going to be shown the dying process, but kept in a state of analytical consciousness so he could remember it and write it down afterwards. And so he describes the whole process. He actually does it in two different places, one in his book Heaven and Hell, and the other in his book Secrets of Heaven. And okay, I'll give you the short version. So at first he feels his physical body shutting down. He says his breathing got really shallow, but there was a little bit of breathing maintained, but then he could start to feel his spiritual breath happening. So Swedenborg is very big on, we've got a spirit and a body. And just like your body has a form, it's got all kinds of organs in it and cells and tissues. That's how it is alive and is a body. Your spirit has that same kind of complexity in it, and it has a form. So you have spiritual lungs, and they're similar but not the same. Everything spiritual is everything physical is about matter and shape, but spiritual things are about love and wisdom. So your spiritual lungs, even though you could look, sorry if this seems like a little bit complicated, but you could look at them if you could see spiritual, and they'd have the same shape, but what they are is an embodiment of your mind, of your like intellect. So you have these spiritual lungs, they're going, and he began to feel his spirit getting pulled out of his body. So he says it felt even just like a pulling feeling. So after he was out of that, he went through this progression where he was surrounded by different kinds of angels at different times that were each crucial for a different part of the transition. So he started out surrounded by what he called celestial or heavenly angels. And these are people who are most open to love and wisdom. We talked about you got to open to love and wisdom to progress. So this is like you're all the way, you never get all the way open, but your major categories of ability to be open are opened. And so you enter this state where you're really directly receiving God's love and wisdom into you. And so you're what he calls a heavenly or a celestial angel, depending on which translation. And when they were around, he was not fully conscious in his mind, but was feeling things. And they were around, and he says that they were like curating his feelings. So making sure that anything that in one translation it says did not taste of love didn't come near him. So he didn't have any disturbing thoughts or anything that was going to disrupt. He's in this very fragile part of the process. So they were around him. And then as he started to stir, I realized I said this would be the short version, but this is just about as long as he tells it in the books. So as he starts to wake up, he says that actually the angels around him changed to what he calls spiritual angels. And the spiritual angels are a little more cognitive, more interested. They like the celestial angels are love oriented and the spiritual angels are wisdom oriented. So those angels were the ones who he said it seemed like, and he knew it was just an appearance or a correspondence, like a symbolic action, but it seemed like they pulled a covering off of his left eye. That's where we get our channel name. And that gave him the use of his spiritual sight. So from there, he describes a really warm welcome where he says angels do everything that you could possibly ask for in that stage. Anything you want, they'll get it for you. They'll answer questions. They'll show you heaven, whatever you want. And it was cool for me because I had heard of Swedenborg before near-death experiences. So when I started reading near-death experiences, which was, when I was maybe 20 or something, that filled in some of the emotional detail of that, because Swedenborg will write about it, but he's a little academic at times, and he was really trying to get across technical stuff. So you get a hint of what it feels like, but you really get color added to that picture by near-death experiences. But he does describe something which I think is really overwhelming, where the angels care for you in every way. And then where you go next is up to you, because he says angels never leave anyone, but if you start to feel a little smothered in that atmosphere, like this is a little too much, then you move away and you find spirits or people who have passed on who are similar to you, and that's where you really start to feel comfortable. And from there you begin this big progression of getting clarity on what it is you really love and care about. And from there, that leads you to a community of other people who love and care about the same thing. And from there, you move on to start being a citizen of the afterlife.
In my brief study, and I don't know a lot of detail about it at all, but one of the things that I noticed is he talked about different levels in the afterlife, different places. I think I saw that he mentioned heaven, hell, and the world of the spirits. And then within heaven, I think he said there was 3 levels. Maybe you could correct me or expound on that.
No, you got it. That's right. So there's a map you can draw of the spiritual world. And like I was saying before, everything spiritual is based on love and wisdom. So it's not like there are levels of the spiritual world because some things are higher up and you have to climb to get to them, because that's the way physical stuff works. But there, all the levels, all the distances, everything is determined by what you love. It's like love is gravity. Like here, there's planets and they're a certain distance from the sun. They're moving at a certain speed because gravity or whatever. I know they're reinvestigating that theory. I don't know exactly the state of the science around it, but something like gravity is keeping everything in its orbit, and it's what led to things where they are. But so love does that in the spiritual world. So the spiritual world is the blanket term for everything. The world of spirits, it's a little confusing, but the world of spirits is the first place you go after you die. And that's this place it's in between heaven and hell. And it's where everybody starts, and it's where you start to sort yourself out. So then heaven and hell are familiar terms to Christians, but Swedenborg has a particular take on what they are. So as I was saying, everything is about love, and heaven is the state that's caused by you loving usefulness. So like we were talking about before, when you love to do things that help people, that the joy you get in that, at one point, Swedenborg says, feeling joy in someone else as joy in yourself, that is heaven. And the opposite of that is hell, which is when you're enjoying causing someone else to suffer. So and everybody knows that that's there. It's like that's why when you're a kid, you make fun of people or you do mean things. You're just like, that's kind of fun. And here, when somebody gets you mad and people do road rage, there's a pleasure in doing bad things. And he says that's what hell is. So obviously God is wanting us to do the heaven thing and go after this love of the human race, right? And love of usefulness. But we have ultimately, as many people have heard, we have free will. And so that the way that really plays out is you're free to love what you want to love and enjoy what you want to enjoy. And there's God is trying to get you to enjoy good things and things that are constructive and things that are going to help other people. But nobody can reach in and force you to enjoy one or the other. So the way heaven and hell are almost like self-organizing, because, as I said, like what you love determines your distance or closeness to God. So the more that your love, because all closeness or distance is caused by a difference or similarity in what you love spiritually. So God loves everyone. God loves to make other people happy. That's the fundamental love, that divine love that drives God, and the wisdom goes with that love. So the more that we're like that, the more that we enjoy helping other people, the closer that brings you to God. And the more that you love the opposite of that, and you, whatever, think of all the terrible things people do to each other, the more that you're doing that intentionally, the farther that pushes you away from love, which is the farther it pushes you away from God. And so in either case, you come to be around people who are like you. So if you're there and you're around, if you love helping other people and you're around a bunch of people that love helping other people, that sounds like heaven to me. And if you love harming other people, and really what he says is the opposite of God's love, which is love of the neighbor, or love of, it's the two great commandments, right? The opposite of that is love of yourself over other people. So he says that usually expresses as love of controlling or ruling over other people. So that's the main opposition. The secondary opposing love is love of like sensory gratification. So just love of you could call it selfishness and materialism. Those are the two things. So the more that you are into that stuff, the more that you're around other people who are, and that creates these conditions that Swedenborg calls hell. Because hell is really God trying to keep people who have devoted themselves to doing bad things from hurting each other as much as possible. And so from that, you get this world in which you see these things that are in pop culture and everywhere, like heaven and hell. But it's, when you get down to what's the core of it, what drives it, it's pretty different. And it's all about what you love. It's not that God is gonna, you did this thing wrong, so I'm gonna put you in hell to get you back for it. This is like, you go where what's in your heart is.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I've never heard it described quite like that. So what I hear you saying is that everything is based around love. And so it's even love that's drawing people to hell because of what they love. So that's so interesting. And then how you broke it down and said that hell is like when you experience road rage and that pleasure that you get, or maybe how somebody feels when they're gossiping about somebody, or just like that selfish pleasure that you get from it. So that really helps to pinpoint what it is.
I forgot to tell you about the levels. So the levels of heaven and the levels of hell, it's just being more and more open to those different pleasures. So he talks a lot about levels, and it's something that I don't feel like I totally have my head wrapped around, but I can give you my understanding of it. So he says that there's levels in everything, and there are levels in the human mind. And the more that we have 3 levels in the human mind, and if the first level is opened in you, which it means opened toward heaven, then you're in the first heaven, or the first state of heaven. If the second level is open, you go to the second layer of heaven, and the third level is the third heaven, and then hell is the opposite of those layers. But so the levels are not like stacked on top of each other, but if you think about it, like your body, you can think on the organ level. So you have a level where you can think about, I have lungs and the heart and stomach. Then you can zoom in and think on the tissue level, like my heart is made up of these little tissues. And you can zoom in even farther and think on a cellular level, like I'm just looking at a single cell. That's he says that's the kind of level he's talking about. So if you think of, if your mind is open to the first level, it's just open in the broadest sense, like, oh yeah, I'm opened up. But if you're open on the second level, it's like even your individual tissues, like all the parts that make up you are open. And then the third level is every little bit of you is like open to God. So that, and the reverse is hell, when everything is closed down from God and centered on selfishness and materialism instead.
So it's more like zooming in than actually going up a level.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So did he talk about what happens to somebody in hell? Do they continue progressing downward, or can people leave hell at some point?
I don't know for sure. He talks earlier in his well, he's like a journal of spiritual experiences, and he'll talk about people coming up out of hell after some time and they've learned something. There's other times when he says, well, you have a nature that doesn't change after you die. So different Swedenborgians are sort of split on that, but I think it really comes down to only you can put there's no gate closing you into hell. It's just what you love there. Swedenborg talks all the time about, he calls people who are in hell evil spirits, and he calls people who are in heaven good spirits or angels. He'll call people in hell demons or satans in the plural, and he says that a demon is somebody who is oriented towards negative stuff, and particularly towards negative cravings like feelings. And Satan is somebody who's oriented towards false ideas, right? So, and then angels, like I said already, the celestial and the spiritual angels are about love and wisdom. So he'll talk all the time though with evil spirits, and they'll say, well, we want to go up to heaven. And so he's like, okay. And they're allowed to, they go up, but when they get there, they can't breathe, because the spiritual world, everything is shaped by the love that's in people and the wisdom that's in people. So the atmosphere that a bunch of people have that are together and living in mutual love is completely unpalatable to somebody who's made the center of their life, love of myself over other people. I'm thinking of, the Grinch, like the cartoon, when he's like, Grinch can't stand Whoville because they're all like there and they're singing together and I can't stand this. It's kind of like that. So I do think there's a lot of processes. There's like, when we get to the world of spirits, there's all kinds of processes where people can have opportunities to get evil stuff that's clinging to them off of them. He does talk that everything that happens in hell is designed to keep people there from getting worse and try to get them to stop doing their evils. And it seems like they're okay. I'm going to try to get it so that you'll stop doing that and start doing something that's a little more useful and a little better. And when people do that, they get into a happier sort of state of mind. But ultimately, people are where they want to be. He has, at the end of his book, Divine Providence, he has this funny little story where he says, forgive me for including this to fill out the rest of the page, because I think in the day that he's printing, you're supposed to have, fill out the plates for each printed page, or else it's expensive to waste paper like that. And he tells this story of, there's a couple of spirits from hell came to talk to him, and they said, you've written a lot of stuff about heaven, but for talking to angels, but now we want to say some things. And he's like, okay, well, what do you want to say? And they're essentially saying, come on, heaven is dumb. Like it's really fun. We're having fun here. You guys with your like, be nice to each other. Like what, this is really where it's at. Don't be a square. So they're not saying like, we're so sorry. This is where we were wrong. God, stop punishing us. That it's like it's a way, as long as you're in that way of life, as long as you're actively enjoying the things that harm people, nobody could put you in heaven without damaging you a lot. So divine providence, God's guidance over the human race, is constantly trying to lead us away from that evil and into a love of what's good. But and in the meantime, making life in hell as happy for everyone as it can possibly be. Letting them have as much of their joy as they can without harming themselves, corrupting themselves further, or harming other people extensively. So I would think so. The point of everything is a happy human race. So I would think God's got some kind of long-term plan to get everybody into that state. But yes, but certainly there's like there's a lot of people who are not into the love of everyone right now. And so God's like adjusting on the fly, or whatever. I mean, in a very organized way, but trying to make the best out of a situation where a lot of people are choosing the negative stuff.
Wow, you're just giving me so much to think about, and how the way that you described um, how those demons were having a good time and saying, "Hey, we're having fun down here." It almost reminds me of how it might be on Earth, like how people are happy being the way they are, and they're allowed to continue in that path until something sort of nudges them in the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Swedenborg says that you can be in heaven or hell right now. That
Mhm.
just like you have a body, and the body's somewhere in the physical world, your spirit is somewhere in the spiritual world right now. And it's actually in a community of spirits that are like you. So you can be in the world and in heaven at the same time. And the more that we look to love what's good and what's true, the more our spirit moves up into these higher communities and gets more and more into heaven. And from that, we get more of the inspiration, loving inspiration and wise thoughts, and we enjoy heaven more and more. And the same thing is true with hell. The more that we act on those impulses and treasure them and excuse them and justify them in our mind, we can be in hell in our life right now. So heaven and hell, absolutely, you can't ever know what somebody else's spiritual state is. Like he says that it's important, and that you can never make a spiritual judgment on someone where you say, I know that you're in heaven or in hell in your spirit, because we don't, only God knows that. And he says that somebody who it seems like, wow, they're really messed up, could actually be good, but they just had so much life baggage or whatever, or they're dealing with so much. Or somebody who seems to be super nice and loving could be really egocentric and doing it all for selfish reasons, but hide it well. You can't really know, but everybody is somewhere. So heaven and hell are right here around us, and influencing us all the time. And that's why I think that's where you get these ideas like that cartoon angel and the devil on the shoulder. There really is heaven and hell all the time are saying, hey, come with us. No, come with us. Like which do you want to do in this moment, as you have a person in front of you? How are you going to treat them? And that's what it all comes back to.